I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Michael Rivero, founder and editor of WhatReallyHappened.com. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thank you for having me again.
The Manchester Arena bombing after the concert, what have you heard about it?
Well, it appears to be a bombing by this 22-year-old gentleman, Salman Abedi. He was apparently known to the authorities, but they didn't do anything about it. And a lot of people are saying that yet another terror attack illustrates that all this surveillance on us, the reading of our emails, the spying on our phone calls, really does not, in fact, protect us from acts of terror. And maybe it's time to just shut all of that nonsense down, go back to having the Fourth Amendment, and figuring out another way to deal with terrorism. And there are two solutions to that. First of all, it is a rather reckless and dumb idea to be bombing other people's countries and then opening your doors to people coming from those countries, who are probably very, very bitter about what was done to them. They're bitter about having America bomb their businesses and their families and their friends. They're bitter about having to leave their country and go someplace else. And that certainly goes a long way to explaining all the crime and rape that is taking place across Europe and increasingly here in the United States of America. The other thing to keep in mind is that to the other side, it's not really acts of terrorism, it's unsymmetrical warfare. And if you really want terrorism to go away, the best way is to stop messing around with other people's countries. But unfortunately, since the end of World War II, the U.S. government has developed this pattern of messing around with other people's countries. Regime change, covert overthrow, economic warfare, if not outright invasion and takeover. And necessarily this represents a threat. And again, for the U.S. to be doing this at the same time they're trying to have open borders and say everybody's welcome to come on in, yeah, that's going to increase the possibility of terror attacks inside our country, which are not being stopped by the NSA and FBI and CIA's constant surveillance of the law-abiding American people.
Have you seen any cell phone footage of the arena attack?
I saw one briefly. It didn't seem to be all that big of an affair, but then it was a long shot. Again, even CNN was out there saying this could be a right-wing false flag attack.
Do you think it might be related to the upcoming election in the UK?
It could be related to the upcoming election. It could have been a media distraction to get Seth Rich off of the U.S. corporate media, because that's causing a great deal of panic within the Democratic National Committee and Hillary's people. And again, it may have been done for a variety of reasons. But I think, if anything, it's going to encourage the British voters to certainly vote a more Eurosceptic parliament into power.
Is the Seth Rich file gaining traction?
Oh, it's certainly on the independent media, and we're starting to see the corporate media react in a panic. Now, you need to understand the original story that actually did appear in the corporate media appeared in the Washington, D.C. Fox News affiliate, and they ran the story about how Seth Rich was confirmed to be the DNC leaker, and Fox Network has ordered them to pull the story and basically retract it, take it back. But it's a little too late. The cat is out of the bag. And we have people of stature like Newt Gingrich and Sean Hannity are out there saying this needs to be looked at. Kim.com has come forward to say that, yes, he too knew that Seth Rich was the DNC leak because he, Kim.com, was part of the pipeline by which the information went from Seth Rich to WikiLeaks. Of course, the corporate media is out there already screaming, it's all conspiracy theory, you're a bunch of wide-eyed kooks. How could you even believe this? And part of that is, first of all, protecting whoever carried out this assassination. And second of all, the corporate media has literally bet the farm, if you will, over the last several months that Russia hacked the DNC emails. And now, with an absence of any evidence Russia did any such thing, and a confirmed story that it was an internal leak, that whole Russia hacking narrative has collapsed, and the corporate media is left with more egg on their face. And the Seth Rich story itself is starting to develop more interesting information. For one thing, somebody leaked out the actual incident report from the D.C. police, and it confirms Seth Rich was still alive and conscious when the police got to him. But whatever he told the police, we will never know, because the video from the body cameras on the police officers is missing. There was also another report that was put on out by the emergency room physician who initially treated Seth Rich, and it was released without a name on it, but unfortunately I'm sure they're going to be able to find out who it was. And it turned out the doctor said his wounds were not fatal. He was shot in relatively low-threatening areas. They removed the bullets, and they thought he was going to recover just fine. Then all of a sudden, a huge number of law enforcement officials show on up, crowd into the room, kick out the doctors, and then by the time the doctors are allowed back in, Seth Rich is on the verge of death. So it looks like they botched the original hit, and somebody had to sort of cowboy finishing the job. But very obviously, the official story doesn't make any sense. They're still saying it was a botched robbery. But again, nothing of any value was taken from Seth Rich's body. He still had his wallet, his cell phone, and his very expensive wristwatch. And interestingly enough, the bar that Seth Rich was at just before he was killed, nobody went to talk to the owner or employees. Nobody asked to see the surveillance video to see if anybody was stalking him. And apparently there are surveillance videos all over that neighborhood where he was actually shot, and nobody's asked to see those. And by now, of course, they've been recycled.
We'll have more with Michael Rivero right after the break.
Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Michael Rivero. Michael, how would you rate President Trump's trip to the Middle East so far?
Well, I don't know. Donald of Arabia, I guess. It's a lot of song and dance there. I can tell he's struggling with the jet lag. But it's interesting to hear Donald Trump talk about peace at the same time he's signing this $110 billion weapons deal with Saudi Arabia. And with, in all probability, those weapons are going to be used on the people of Yemen and potentially the people of Iran. It does seem to be shaping up that Saudi Arabia is going to be the U.S. proxy again for another war in the region, just like how the U.S. used Iraq for a war against Iran some years back. And I think Saudi Arabia ought to look at what happened to Iraq after that proxy war on Iran on the benefit of the United States, because Iraq has not done very well. And sooner or later, Saudi Arabia will find itself on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list for regime change.
Is Michael Flynn going to be found in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify and turn over materials?
I think he probably ought to be, and it is very much of concern that he is taking the Fifth Amendment, and that indicates that maybe something did happen that the American people do need to know about. But we know that the claim that Donald Trump interfered with the investigation is now discredited. because the New York Times has actually pulled the story. The reporter who wrote the story never saw a memo written by James Comey. It was basically described to him over the phone from an anonymous source, which, by the normal standards of professional journalism, you never would have gone with a story like that. And the Times has now been forced to retract that. The other indicator that it was a hoax is that 2 months after the time that Comey supposedly wrote this memo saying that Donald Trump asked me to step back, Comey testified under oath before a congressional committee, and he said at that time that no, he had never been asked by anybody to limit an investigation for political reasons. So somebody somewhere is lying.
Is medical marijuana in jeopardy under the Trump administration?
It does seem that Attorney General Sessions is on the warpath against marijuana, and they're still using those tired, worn-out diatribes about how marijuana is a gateway drug. If you smoke a marijuana cigarette, you will inevitably, there'll be no option. You will inevitably wind up on heroin or crack, living in an alley somewhere, which has never been documented. What is really driving this, of course, is opposition to legalized marijuana coming from the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, and from the pharmaceutical industry, which is very much concerned that several of their high-priced medications can be replaced with medical marijuana at a much lower cost to the patient. And so they're all very much opposed to this idea. Interestingly enough, on a side note, somebody actually did a study and said that people who are slightly intoxicated on marijuana do not lose their driving skills the way people on alcohol do. So, again, we're finding out that marijuana was never really the monster that was described to us in these propaganda films like Reefer Madness. I remember being shown that in high school. And people look back on that now and realize it was just an absolute joke of propaganda along the levels of Duck and Cover and Bert the Turtle.
We'll have more with Michael Rivero right after this.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Michael Rivero. Michael, is the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal going ahead without the U.S.?
We're hearing mixed reports on it. There are several provisions that were in the TPP that were put there by the United States that a lot of the other participants did not like, such as a mandatory ban on all GMO labeling. I think if the TPP is going to go ahead without the United States, it's probably going to go through several rewrites. But again, the goal of the TPP and the TTIP was an attempt to sort of lock the world's economic system as it is now before more and more countries start moving away from the dollar and towards the ruble and the yuan. So I don't know how successful it's going to be. It depends on what the U.S. economy does in the coming months. And frankly, I'm not optimistic.
Are riots being planned for major cities?
Well, I keep hearing all about this summer of rage nonsense, and I hope it's not going to happen. But there are a lot of very angry people out there. And if there is an organized effort to have riots in the cities, I'm not sure what their agenda is. But it could quickly explode into something that is out of control. And I hope it doesn't happen, but yes, it could. I hear too many people talking about it.
Is Robert Mueller in a conflict of interest, or Mueller?
Very much so. In fact, the fact that Comey was his deputy when Mueller was head of the FBI, and apparently he has connections through his law firms to some of these various parties in this investigation. But apparently we're being told that Congress is going to basically wave their hand and say, we don't see a conflict of interest, so you go get Donald Trump.
What's happening with James Comey right now?
As far as I know, he is saying that he is willing to talk to Mueller in private, but not to testify in public.
In Oregon, a bill is under consideration that would allow farmers to sue biotech patent holders like Monsanto for essentially trespassing on their property. Is the bill likely to become law?
I would say that Monsanto is going to uncork their lobbyists and political pressure against this bill, and we have seen Monsanto able to defeat these measures. We even had one here in Hawaii over on the island of Maui where they were trying to say we do not want any of these experimental GMO fields. We're trying to keep Hawaii's agricultural produce GMO-free because that's what the majority of the world wants. And Monsanto was able to come on in here, and they found a judge that they could influence, and it just went back and forth. But the upshot is Monsanto got to plant their seeds on Maui. We saw how powerful Monsanto was to defeat Prop 37 in California. And there have been a lot of lawsuits by organic natural farmers trying to protect their livelihood. But Monsanto seems very intent on creating a seed monopoly all over the world where everybody will eventually be using their GMO-modified seeds, and not always by choice. If your field becomes contaminated by the seeds, you can't go back. It takes a minimum of 3 years or literally burning the soil to get rid of that pollen. And a lot of farmers whose fields have been contaminated by GMO seeds, when they're looking at potential lawsuits from Monsanto, they'll just go ahead and sign the contract. And the reality is that these GMO varieties of plants are not producing the same yield as the natural varieties, and so these farmers are getting into trouble. They don't have as much sellable harvest at the end of the year. There was a big disaster in India a couple of years ago over BT cotton, where Monsanto convinced the government of India to literally order all the cotton farmers to use this BT cotton, and it turned out the BT cotton was less resilient to environmental change than the natural variety. These GMO plants work very well in a laboratory setting where everything is controlled, but that's not the real world. So the cotton crop was a disaster that year. Farmers were losing their farms to the banks, and a lot of those farmers just committed suicide. And it was an absolute epic fail. But we seem to be living under a corporatocracy where they're going to force you to buy and use what they want to sell you. And it doesn't matter if it isn't effective, if it isn't healthy, even if it's dangerous. We're even seeing that within the vaccine industry, where, yes, you are going to pump these 37, 38 different chemicals into the arm of your children, and they may not need them, and yes, they might even cause them harm, but hey, we're indemnified and we're making money, so we're allowed to do what we want.
Is the Trump administration planning to increase atmospheric geoengineering?
I have heard absolutely nothing on that subject whatsoever, and the idea of geoatmospheric engineering is kind of not really supported by any hard evidence that I have seen.
China put out a report saying it's really concerned about its food supply because the people there don't trust domestically grown food. They want to get their food from other sources. Do they really have a reason to be scared of their own food?
I would be interested in finding out what their source of concern is, because China does have very strict food safety standards. In fact, they ban GMO. And there have been a couple of cases of American farms who think they're growing natural varieties of corn and wheat, and they'll set up a shipload, send it to China. China will test it, say, no, we're finding markers from genetic engineering. You have to take it back. And it's caused a lot of economic harm in our country. So I'm not sure where the concern is coming from within the Chinese people. It's something that probably I ought to take a closer look at.
Michael, a trend I'm really seeing on television news now is they run stories but don't identify where the story is from. The latest being a little girl was hauled off a pier by a sea lion in the Vancouver area. People are showing this on newscasts around the world, but they're not even saying it happened in Vancouver. They try to make it seem like it happened in their own neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm afraid the corporate media is right now they're in a panic because their ratings are down. And more of the corporate TV news media are starting to act like the tabloid magazines you see at your supermarket checkout line, where they're just going for sensation. And again, we're seeing iconic newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post just ignore the basic rules of journalism to run with stories they think are going to get them readers. like this New York Times story about this James Comey wrote a memo that Trump tried to block the investigation, and then it turned out the reporter had never seen the memo. It was just described to him. That's a violation of the basic principles of responsible reporting.
Michael, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me.
My guest has been Michael Rivero, founder and editor of WhatReallyHappened.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report. If you have any questions for us or our guests, you can email us at info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.